about Jennifer, I would like to tell you a little bit about Jennifer's position with Rotary, because I know even as a past district governor, for a long time, I didn't quite get the whole hierarchy of it and what the position represents. Jennifer it's kind of like being on the board of directors of a very, very large corporation. Obviously with 1.2 some odd million people. Jennifer is the director, one of 17 in the world. So we are extremely honored that she could take time out of this crazy travel schedule she has to be here today. She basically represents the upper third of the United States at the board level of Rotary International and little smatterings of Canada. So that is her position. And again, we're very, very, very blessed to have her be able to come and see us today. I've known Jennifer for a little bit over a decade, I think. She was the person that somehow convinced me to give $1,000 to the Rotary International Foundation to help cut somebody's hair. And that's a really long story, so if you ever want to know, I'll be happy to tell you down the road. But, I met her and I fell in love instantly. Good girl crush, what can I say? Anyway, I was not going to read her bio because I thought, well, it's an awful lot of stuff, and I thought I have to because a lot of this I didn't even know. So here we go. Jennifer is the president and CEO of Media Street Productions in Windsor. It's an award-winning television production company. She's a proud member of the Rotary Club of Windsor-Roseland and is past district governor of our great district, the first female governor of our district. In Rotary, she served as the chair of Strengthening Rotary's advisory group, the moderator of the 2013 Rotary Public Image Institute, vice chair of the Communications Committee, North American Rotary Public Image Coordinator. She's been on the advisory board for Rotary Canada and the promotions committee for Lisbon and New Orleans International Conventions. And the list goes on, but I think we want her to talk at some point. One of Rotary International's most recognized communicators, Jennifer has presented keynote addresses and training workshops, this is why I had to bring this up, at more than 100 conferences across North America and most recently in St. Petersburg, Russia, Panama City, Bangkok, Lisbon, Finland, India, Sri Lanka, New Zealand, Australia, and Germany. And she rounds it out with the exotic place in Grosse Pointe, Southeast Michigan. I love it, I love it. Jennifer also contributes much of her energy to local organizations as well. She's the immediate past chair for the Board of Governors at the University of Windsor, the past chair of the Board of Directors at the Windsor-Essex Regional Chamber of Commerce. She has been recognized with many, many awards in Rotary, including Rotary Service Above Self Award, the Citation for Meritorious Service, YMCA Peace Medallion, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, and the first award for a Canadian from the Wayne State University's Peacemaker of the Year. Jennifer is happily married to Nick. He is a local physician in Canada, and I think Monday is the only day he really works, isn't it? Yeah, I thought so. Anyway, they share a love for many things, including travel, obviously, cycling, golf, and relaxing at the family cottage. They share a thirst for adventure and reached the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania in January of 2009. As champions of the Rotary Foundation, they are members of the Arch C. Clump Society, and if you don't know what that is, look it up, the Paul Harris Society, and are charter members of the Bequest Society. Jennifer, as I said, we met over a decade ago. She inspired me then. She encouraged me to apply to be district governor. She inspires me today, not just through her Rotary work, but through her passion as a human being and the way that she handles everybody and every situation she's in. She is my friend. You will be inspired. Jennifer.
How's everybody doing? You know, I cannot thank you enough. And President Fred, thanks so much for having me here. And Kim, thank you for the incredible introduction. Your friendship is very dear to me. And I look out around the room, and there are so many faces of people who are absolutely dear, dear, dear friends. And I can honestly say that all of my best friends in life are Rotarians. And many of you are in this room today. So it's a real joy to be able to be here with you. You know, I was reflecting as we were sitting at our table today and hearing, we were talking about some of the old meetings that I've been here before, and one of my favorites is when you have the singers in, and I was asking Fred if that was going to happen, and he said next week, and you just heard that. And it made me reflect upon a story a couple of years ago that I thought perhaps I would share with you, because it really shows the power of a small world and how Rotary sometimes weaves its magic in very interesting ways. I was at my own home Rotary Club, and Sam and Julie Drakic are here from Windsor Roseland, and you may remember this happening. We had a barbershop quartet in for the holidays, and they were singing Christmas carols, and they were getting us all into the holiday spirit. And one of the songs, which really wasn't a Christmas carol that they sang, was the song Zippity Doo Dah. Everybody remembers Zippity Doo Dah, Zippity. And so anyway, this was a song that my Uncle Jack used to sing to me when I was a little girl. And so when they started singing this song, it was something that just gave me a lot of warmth, and great memories just came rushing back. And at the time, he was terminally ill with cancer. And it was special. So I went home that night and I called him. He had moved 3 hours away from Windsor, and he and my aunt were living up closer to Toronto. And so I called, and he was no longer able to speak. He was on oxygen. And so I told him this story because I thought that he would really like to hear that, you know, I had thought of him today in that day in such a special way. And so my aunt came on the phone afterward, and she said, oh, he absolutely heard every word. He knew everything that was going on, that was being said. So fast forward a couple of weeks later, and he passed away, and we made this journey up the 401 to the funeral. And it was a very small funeral, just family, so probably about 20 of us were there. And it was the night before his funeral, and we were all at the funeral home. And I have to tell you, it was like a ghost walked into the room. The gentleman who sang the lead in the barbershop quartet on Zippity Doo Dah walked into the room, and it turned out he was one of his best friends. And it was just an amazing, I mean, I literally walked over to him and just said, you know, like, what are you doing here? And then when we put two and two together, it was just such a special, special thing. So I thought I would share that with you. Anyway, you didn't have to own an iPad or an iPhone or download off of iTunes to feel the passing of Steve Jobs, did you? Jobs, as we know it, the founder and the genius behind Apple. In a now famous commencement speech that he gave at Stanford University called How to Live Before You Die, he said, I want to tell you three stories from my life. That's it, no big deal, just 3 stories. And that's because not only did he understand how to develop great products, he understood the value in the impact of a great story. Each one of those stories had a lesson, and it was something that he was able to impart to all of those young people. And that's what I want to talk with you about today, the creation of Rotary Moments. I want to talk a little bit about the new brand of Rotary, how we're working very hard to put forward our most relevant face as we enter our 2nd century of service. And I want to talk about our core values. So in terms of strengthening Rotary, what does this mean? We've taken a very serious look at our brand. And over the past 5 years, working with an international firm, have looked very deeply at what it is that we do, who we are, what we do, and why it actually matters. And the reality is that we've done just research globally, tens of thousands of people that we've talked to. And this is a really startling point. If we narrow it down to 10 and we ask people what their knowledge base is of Rotary, 4 in 10 have never heard of us, 4 in 10 have maybe heard our name, and only 2 in 10 have even heard of our organization. Now, I don't know about you, but for all of us who live, bleed Rotary, it's part of our DNA, that's a pretty startling thing. And the reality is that for so long we were told to do our good work quietly and not for recognition because we didn't want to be braggarts. We didn't want to be seen that way. But the reality is that when we tell people what it is that we're doing, more people want to join with us. I think it's actually our best tool for membership is to actually bring people along and tell them stories about the good things that we're doing. Because I know when we share these stories, people say, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of that something that's bigger than me. And Rotary gives us that opportunity to do something great in the world. The power of one amplified by 1.2 million. As a direct result of all of the branding research that we did, we came to 3 conclusions. And these are 3 what I consider game changers for our organization. The very first one is that we're leaders by mindset, by the way that we think, not by our titles. Now that's a pretty Herculean shift for our organization. It's about the way we think. And you know, we've spent a lot of time really focusing on how do we get younger members into our organization, and I think that's important. We need to fill in, and we need to make sure that we're continuing to grow. But I like to frame it differently. I think that we want to bring in young thinkers. How many of you have ever met somebody who's 20 years old and is old? Exactly. So we want young thinkers who are 20, who are 30, who are 40, who are 50, who are 60, who are 70. People who think young. That's important. But leadership by the way we think and not by title is important to young people because you know what? They're not in the general manager, CEO roles at this point in time in their career. But are they leaders? Darn straight. And can we learn from each other? Absolutely. The second key finding is that we're all about connectivity. The enduring connections that we make with each other, the friendships that I mentioned at the beginning, best friends in the world are Rotarians. It's that connectivity that allows us to do things like no other organization. We bring together vocational diversity, and we can solve the world's most pressing challenges. When we were doing this research, one of the things that was really imperative is that we had to pick language that resonated in all parts of the world. And so there was one statement that was floated, and I said at that point in time, and I'll share it with you, if that doesn't get through the validation testing of words, I'll eat my hat. It was, you know I had to eat my hat, right? Anyway, it went like this. If one Rotarian can change a community, unite 1.2 million, and we can change the world. Isn't that good? But you know what? To our Asian friends and some other cultures, that seemed too braggart. We had to tone it down. So sometimes in North America, I like to share that because I really do think that it's that connectivity that allows us to change the world. So we also, the third key finding that I wanted to mention is that we have the ability to scale globally. So we are community service scaled globally. And that's an important designation as well, because I know that for many clubs, we have clubs that stand over here and say, you know what, we're about community service. We may dabble in international service occasionally, but we're really focused on our community. And then you have other clubs over here who say, you know what, we're really passionate about international service, but you know, we sometimes do some community work. Well, the reality is that we are our own community. We just have the ability to scale up because of our global membership and because of that ability to connect with people in every corner of the world. I love when I post something on Facebook and I look at the people who have liked it. I always get a kick out of this. It's like, wow, India, Finland, Australia, Mexico, and it's just so cool to see that that kind of connection is possible through our great organization. So some of the things that are changing are things to keep us relevant. to keep us flexible. We're really talking right now a lot about flexibility within our organization. You know, one of the things that has been a deal breaker for a lot of people joining our organization has been our attendance requirements. We're loosening up on a lot of these things right now and letting clubs know you have the ability to do Rotary how it works for you. And not that we want to throw out all the rules, but the reality is that the Rotary police are woefully underfunded. And you can do a lot of things differently. My husband's club, they are a smaller club, and so they've actually changed to doing a different cycle of meetings. And just as an example of getting creative, they have one meeting a month that is a service project, one meeting is a club assembly, one meeting is a speaker, and one meeting is a club social. And they only have a speaker once a month because they were having such dismal turnout when a speaker was there. It was really embarrassing to ask somebody to come and speak when only 5 or 6 or 10 people were sitting there. So what do you think the most well-attended meeting is? Absolutely, it's because of the friendships, the enduring connections that we make with each other. The one thing, though, that doesn't change, that will never change, is our core values. What is important and relevant to us as an organization. And I want to share with you our 5 core values and a story associated with each of them. The first one is about service, and I know that probably a few of you have heard this story before, but this is my favorite service story on a personal level. Nick and I, we were in a small island nation a couple of years ago. We were doing some community service work there and some medical work. And they asked us if we would go to this village, which was about 3 hours away from the area where we were staying, and you had to go by boat. And so we got into this rickety little boat, and we started this 3-hour journey out over the water. And as we started to approach the shoreline, a really magical thing happened. It started to become populated with all these people. We could see little dots off in the distance. And as we got closer, we could see that they were children. And as we came closer, we could see that they were holding on to adult-sized underwear or tattered t-shirts. But every single one of them had a distended belly, a sign of what's called kwashiorkor, or what we would better know as malnutrition. But you know what? Like all children, they were laughing, they were playing, and they had no idea that there was anything wrong. And so we got out of the boat and we gave them some soccer balls, and they had a room set up so that Nick could see patients. This was really an assessment trip to see what was going on in this village. They'd never seen a doctor before. And so we were in this room, we had a translator, and I was taking notes, and the people lined up around the building there to see the medicine man. And one by one, over the course of the day, they came in and they presented with all the same kinds of things, actually, quite honestly, that he would see in his practice here in North America. But there were 2 young men in their late 20s, early 30s that came in over the course of the day, and they both presented with exactly the same symptom. They talked about how they had a fever. They had a fever in their belly. And so Nick asked them probing questions. Well, when do you have the fever? When don't you have the fever? And the reality was the only time they didn't have the fever was the once or maybe twice in a week that they'd had a meal. They didn't need a diagnosis, they needed food. I don't tell you that story to make you sad. I tell you that story because, as I said earlier, I think when we share these things with others, it motivates people to want to help and to take action. And I'm very proud to tell you that there is a school in that village now that has a food program, and those children have a daily meal, as do their families, and that will help to break the cycle of poverty in that village. They will have better opportunities in their life, and that's what's afforded to us through service in our great organization. Our second core value is diversity. And that's diversity on so many levels. I mentioned vocational diversity already, but there's many different gender, race, everything that we bring together in this huge melting pot of an organization called Rotary. And one of the jewels from a diversity standpoint is our youth exchange program. and getting to know young people from all different countries. And that is really, truly one of the best things that has ever touched my life. We've had 3 youth exchange sons, and I want to tell you about Leo. Leo was from Brazil. He was our first son, and he was with us about 10 years ago, and it was this time of the year, it was the holidays, and he had been struggling to kind of fit in school. And in Brazil, he was the cool kid. He was the guy who led all the parties, had all kinds of girlfriends, everything like this. And it wasn't really happening for him that way at home, in our home in Canada. And it was a little bit more of a slower process as he acclimated. And so it was Christmas Eve, and we were driving home from midnight mass, and he was sitting in the back seat of the car. And he said, "Nick, Jen, I want to tell you something." And I said, "What's that, Leo?" And he said, "I love you." And then Nick said, "What do you want, Leo?" And he said, No, you don't understand. I have never said those words to anyone in my life, not even my own family. That's what you have taught me. That's a great gift. There was no better Christmas gift that Christmas. Our third core value is integrity. And I want to tell you the story about Larry. Larry was the owner of a company, and he was planning to retire, but he didn't have any children or anyone to leave the company to, and so he gathered all of his executives into the boardroom. And he said to them, a year from now, I am going to retire. And one of you is going to become the new CEO of the company. He said, I'm going to give each one of you a seed. And I want you to go home and plant this seed, and whoever has the biggest plant next year at this time will become the CEO of the company. So Larry went home with his seed, and he planted it, and he watered it, and he nurtured it, and he nurtured it and watered it more, and his wife came out and helped. Nothing happened. Nothing. And so he kept trying, and he kept trying, and over the course of the year, he just kept trying, but nothing happened. So they gathered into the boardroom at the end of the year, and everybody had these big plants, big plants, and everybody was, whispering, what's going on with Larry? And so the CEO said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to the new CEO of our company. He said, Larry, come on up to the front. And he put his arm around Larry, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, Larry is the new CEO. I gave you all dead seeds. Be a Larry. That's integrity. Doing what's right when nobody else is looking. I think we should have buttons that say "Be a Larry." That would be a good reminder for all of us. Fellowship is our fourth core value. Fellowship is something obviously I've touched on a little bit already, but I want to tell you about old Mr. Krieger. How many of you ever knew of Mr. Krieger? He was in the Wyandotte Rotary Club. Just a couple of you. Well, old Mr. Krieger was like the titan of industry, the power broker. He was on the airport authority and Con Ed and everything else. When he said jump, you said how high. He ruled the club with an iron fist. I was asked to go and speak at their club, and this was actually, it was just before I was a governor. And I showed up at this club, and they had asked if I would come because they were just on a resurgence, and they wanted me to talk about putting a human face on our organization for some of their newer members. I thought, great, and so I knew a couple of the guys in the club from attending district conferences and such, and anyway, when I walked in, I gave them each a big hug, because I'm a hugger, and I invade everyone's personal space. And so anyway, I gave a couple of the guys a hug. I did my talk. I thought it was going well. And at the very end, old Mr. Krieger's sitting at the end of the table, and he sticks his hand up. And he says, I have a question or a statement. I want to say something. And you could just see the whole room do this. And so he stood up, and he said, when they decided to let women into Rotary, I led the charge against it. Today, I want to rescind my position, and I want a hug. a little addendum to the story, and this is a beautiful note. He and his wife were married for over 60 years, and he passed away at midnight and she died at 5 a.m. That's a love story. I think that's a real cool love story. The final core value is leadership. We are leaders. We ask people to join who are leaders. And what do? We bring them in and we make them even better leaders. That's what we do in this organization. We join leaders, we exchange ideas, and we take action. That's the new way that we're trying to encourage people when you're asked that question of what is Rotary, to be able to answer with a more unified approach to our elevator speech, if you will. Because if I were to ask everyone in this room what is Rotary, there'd be as many answers as there are people sitting here. And not that that's bad, but the reality is that if we all started sounding a little bit more alike in how we said and answered the question, what is Rotary, it would amplify our organization. You know, can you imagine if McDonald's or Starbucks looked different in every single place in the world? They wouldn't be as strong as they are. So we join leaders, we bring leaders together. And what do you do when you bring leaders together? You exchange ideas. And because we're smart people, we then take action. Can you personalize that? Absolutely. Somebody asks you about what is Rotary? Well, you know what? Our club brings together community and professional leaders. We exchange ideas on a variety of topics of things that we want to change in our community, and we take action. And as a matter of fact, here's a couple of the things our club is working on. So if we can standardize a little bit of how we say that, we're going to amplify. We're going to be singing off the same song sheet. And I think this is vitally important for our organization. So final story about leadership is a very personal one. It's about my mom and dad. And 2 years ago at this time, I was at the International Assembly in San Diego, and this is where we train our governors and governors-elect, I should say. And they're there for a week training, all 534 of them from around the world, and it's an incredible meeting. I mean, you really truly see the world in front of you, and everyone's in their traditional garb, and it's very, very cool. And the week prior to their arrival, my job and Nick's job was to train 40 global training leaders who would then train the district governors. And so we were halfway through this, we had finished that training and we were just getting ready for the governors to arrive, and it was Sunday morning about 7 o'clock in the morning, and I received a call from my brother. And he said that my father had just collapsed in church, and we very quickly surmised that he had had a stroke. Well, I knew that I needed to get on a plane and be back there right away. There was no question in my mind that I was going to be there. Now, before I tell you anything more about the trip home and what happened, let me tell you a little bit about my mom. That was the year that she was serving as a Rotary Club president. My mom did the books for my dad's tool and die company, and she was great at it, and she's an incredible mom. But she'd never really been tested in terms of her leadership ability. She'd never had to stretch in that kind of way ever before. And Rotary was so good for her. She grew and grew and grew over the course of that year. So fast forward now back into the hospital, and I walk into the emergency room. He's still in there. And my mom and my husband and brothers went down to the cafeteria to go get a cup of coffee. And I crawled into bed with my father, and I was just laying there rubbing his arm, and he had complete right side paralysis. And so we're laying there, and through very garbled speech, he said, "I always thought that I would take care of your mom, but because of Rotary, I now know she can take care of me." What a gift. To see the woman he loved more than anything in the entire world change so dramatically over the course of a year, that is what Rotary gives us. That's the gift that we all receive by being part of this organization. And we need to share it, and we need to shout this from the rooftops so that we can get more people in to do the great work that we do. I want to thank you for your leadership. Every single one of you who is sitting here is a leader. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing to change our communities, and to change the world. I'll leave you with a final quote, my absolute favorite, by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "Everyone has the power for greatness, not for fame, but for greatness, because greatness is determined by service." I wish you all the happiest of holidays, and I'm so, so grateful that all of you came here today, and I know many of you from far and wide, and it's just a joy to look out and see so many wonderful, wonderful friends. So thank you very much, and mwah.